A girl from Kansas is brought to a magical land where she is hunted by a wicked witch. Special guest Mike Kahn joins us to chat about Jewish little people, Barbie's unrealistic proportions, and the abusive boyfriend from Beverly Hills 90210. There's no place like home as we find out if The Wizard of Oz stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time, coming to you live from the magical land of Oz. My name is Alan Noah, and joining me as always is my buddy and pal, James Brief.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are also joined by our good buddy, who was just here a couple weeks ago, coming back on the show, Mike Kahn. Welcome back, Mike.
Good to be here. I feel great, feeling high like I'm defying gravity.
I understood that reference. So yeah, I mean, Wicked is in theaters now as soon as this episode comes out. And you were a fan of Wicked or The Wizard of Oz or both, or which came first for you?
I mean, Wizard of Oz I probably saw when I was like 5 years old. Wicked,
okay, yeah. That makes sense.
2004.
Oh, you saw that early, because didn't it hit Broadway in 2003?
It did, yeah. And I remember it being popular and popular. I didn't mean to do that.
I thought you did that on purpose.
Anyway, so someone wanted to buy Danny and me tickets to a show, and I knew that was popular, and we went and we saw that one, and it was a good time. I don't have another one, sorry.
Oh, okay. That's fine. I don't think I could reference another song on that soundtrack. It's been a long time since I saw that. Courtney and I saw it on Broadway, I want to say before we got married, so I'm going to say 06, 07. James, have you seen Wicked on Broadway?
I've never seen Wicked, no.
Okay. Yeah, and so you'd mentioned The Wizard of Oz as a movie to talk about, and now seemed like the perfect time with the movie version of Wicked coming out.
Yeah, we talked about this a year ago, and before we even knew about the Wicked movie, I was shocked that you guys had never done Wizard of Oz, and it being such a timeless classic, I was like, I don't know how these guys haven't dug into it when there's so much to dig into.
That's true. There is an awful lot to say about this movie, and we should get into it. So, James, do you want to give our listeners a recap of the plot of The Wizard of Oz? I don't think there's anyone alive who hasn't seen the movie, but just in case, you never know.
Sure. The Wizard of Oz is a movie about a young girl from Kansas named Dorothy. And Dorothy lives with her Auntie Em, Uncle Henry, and her dog Toto. When Toto bites her neighbor, Miss Gulch wants to have the dog destroyed. But Toto escapes, and Dorothy worries that Miss Gulch will come back, so she runs away. While running away, Dorothy meets a traveling magician who suggests Dorothy go back home. But when she does go back home, there's a tornado, a twister, and Dorothy, Toto, and her whole house are picked up and transported to the magical land of Oz. When the house fell from the sky, it killed the Wicked Witch of the East, and her sister, the Wicked Witch of the West, swears revenge. Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, tells Dorothy to follow the Yellow Brick Road and talk to the wonderful Wizard of Oz, who lives in Emerald City. Along the way, she befriends the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, who join her on her journey in hopes that the wizard will also help them as well, to get a brain, a heart, and courage, respectively. When they arrive in Emerald City, the wizard says he will only help them if they bring back the Wicked Witch's broom. They're able to get the broom when Dorothy melts the witch by throwing water at her. But then the wizard is revealed to be a fraud, though he shows the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion that they already had the attributes they sought. He offers to fly Dorothy home on a hot air balloon, but accidentally flies off without her. Glinda tells Dorothy that she always had the power to return home all along. She just needed to discover that there's no place like home.
Aww. And this movie has become super profitable in the 85 years since it's been released, but it wasn't a big hit right away, right?
No, it was. It had a budget of $3.4 million, and it made about $4 million. So it wowed audiences that got to see it. Remember, this is 1939. But the film eventually, of course, it's a classic, and it made over $25 million in the re-releases over the years. I remember this film even being re-released when we were kids at some point. Apparently it was in 1989 it was re-released, 1998, 2002, 2006. There was even a re-release this year for the 85th anniversary. If you put it in theater, you're going to get some people to go see it.
Right. And the movie starts with a title card that talks about how time has not dulled the story and that this story is already timeless because it was based on a book by L. Frank Baum that had come out in 1900. So it's funny that 85 years ago, this movie kind of bragged about how timeless it was.
Well, we're here for the Test of Time podcast, so I think let us be the judge of that one.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I saw that title card, which I think, by the way, is completely useless for this film. I'd forgotten it exists. This is one of the most successful remakes of all time. The Wizard of Oz was first done in 1910. So it's black and white, and it's a silent film.
It was 1925.
There's also a 1910 one, so there might have been two of them then.
Wow.
You know, there's two things in this film that it's most famous for. One is its color. It's striking Technicolor, that yellow brick road, these ruby red slippers, and then the Wicked Witch of the west. She's the west one, right?
Yes,
the
east one dies.
And she's got this green paint. So it does not work in black and white. A shocking piece of trivia, Somewhere Over the Rainbow was almost cut from this film.
Yes.
And this film doesn't work as a silent film. You can't have a beautiful woman singing silently and then the title card goes, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, ... You know, it just doesn't work.
Well, so there was the 1910 short silent film. Then there was another silent film in 1925. I don't believe either of those were particularly popular or well-liked. But they're all based on a novel that doesn't have any music in it.
It doesn't have a lot of things, actually. I just read it last week.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go back to that. I want to unpack that. I say that because there are books that do have songs in them, like
Lord of the Rings.
The Hunger Games.
And Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Roald Dahl wrote Oompa Loompa songs that are in the text, and you know they changed a lot of those lyrics around, but there are songs in the book. So when they made this movie, it didn't necessarily have to be a musical. That was just a direction that they took.
Right, but this was a beloved novel, story that pretty much everyone had heard of. Just
Yes.
like everyone today, even if you haven't seen the films or read the books, you know of Harry Potter. It's the third time they're making this film, obviously, and they put $3.4 million into this. I mean, this is a well-liked piece of, I guess, what today you call intellectual property.
So you read the original book?
I did, yeah. It was an illustrated version, and the illustrator, I want to say, drew it in the 40s or 50s. And even the way he drew it was so different from how we picture it, because, I mean, we picture the guy playing the lion or the guy playing the scarecrow and how they all have these human properties. And he didn't want to give those characters human-like properties. And if the movie were made like that, where you would just have a CGI lion walking around and saying things, or a CGI scarecrow figure walking around saying things, it would be a very, very, very different movie. But also, so many things that you see in the movie you don't see in the book. There are no ruby slippers. They're silver boots. I think boots.
Yeah, they changed it to ruby because of the Technicolor thing. They wanted it to really pop.
Yeah, and that makes all the sense in the world. The fact that her trip to Oz was a dream, it's not a dream in the book, which is how they have like a dozen or so sequels afterwards. And the way they made this movie is pretty much sequel-proof, which kind of blows my mind because the folks over at MGM left a lot of money on the table.
I still think you could have made a sequel where it's like, no, Dorothy, it is true. However, if they had made this film today, when Dorothy wakes up and says, but you were there, and you were there, and you too, but I guess there's just no place like home. I feel like today, the camera, instead of fading to black or fading to the sky, would have faded to the corner of the room where there would have been a ruby red slipper.
The movie was originally supposed to end with a shot of Dorothy wearing the ruby red slippers
I didn't know
in
that.
Kansas. They were going to be on her feet. But the studio executives thought that audiences couldn't handle it being real, and so they had to do it as a dream sequence. That was the only way they felt that the audiences could buy it. But they did also plan to make a sequel, and then they just couldn't get the deals in order to do it. But they were planning to do one like in the 40s.
Well, here was the other weird thing about this, actually. Apparently Disney passed on making this.
Yes, MGM made this movie kind of riding off of the coattails of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Disney was interested in making a Wizard of Oz movie, and MGM had bought the rights to L. Frank Baum's book for $75,000, which was an obscene amount of money for buying the rights to a book back then. That was like kind of an unheard of figure. But MGM and Disney were going to co-produce it, and there was going to be live action elements and animated elements, and MGM was going to do the live action and Disney was going to do the animated, and then the deal just kind of fell apart, and Disney was like, you know what, we're just going to let MGM have this one.
And then Disney wound up actually buying the rights to the other, I guess, Frank Baum Oz World books, and didn't really do much with them. They made that one movie back in the 80s, I don't know if either of you guys remember, Return to Oz,
right?
That I think was based on a little bit of 2 and a little bit of 3. I don't think I ever saw that one. It didn't really look very good, and I want to say it didn't get very good reviews.
No, it's like widely considered to be a flop, and it's supposed to be creepy and bizarre as all hell, which, from what I've read, is in line with the novels, which were creepy and weird and out there, but felt very, very jarringly different from The Wizard of Oz.
If this were in the 21st century with the big studios, the whole thing would have been handled very differently from day one.
Well, sure.
I mean, everything will be different, which is sort of what gives this film so much of its charm. There's something about watching films that you're almost never supposed to break the magic that you're watching a film. However, this film has 2 fantastic things. One, just the obviousness of the sets that they're in, but the matte background.
Yes.
That is something you just don't see anymore.
Both of those things.
And these paintings are 30 feet tall or something of the background of the Wizard of Oz. And even as a child, I remember it was almost kind of a game where I would watch them as they skip along the yellow brick road. You could see they're running right towards the matte painting, but it fades away right before they're about to hit it because the matte painting continues the yellow brick road into infinity. I remember as a kid watching the Wicked Witch of the West as she appears in Munchkinland. You could see she's escaping through a trap door. There's a hole in the set. Obviously, they're bringing Margaret Hamilton down and up.
That was kind of the interesting thing. I mean, the movie was so state-of-the-art for back then. At the same time, I mean, I'm looking at it now, and especially in light of, like, this podcast and, like, what we're doing here, how much of it really does hold up, and what would it look like if it were made today? Like, you see, like, the fake cornfields, and it's like, holy crap. They couldn't have done better? They couldn't have found, like, a cornfield to shoot this thing in?
Absolutely. And when they're filming the scene when Glinda the Good Witch awakens them from their poppy slumber, were you guys all thinking the same thing I was thinking? Do you know what the horrible thing about that scene when it's snowing?
Yeah, it's asbestos.
It's asbestos. No. And there's one part where the lion, like, it's all over his nose and you can see it, like, go in his mouth. But I kind of like to think that there was at least one person who didn't know it was a color film, and then was just blown away by that opening scene of Munchkinland.
I'm sure, and even when it goes from the black and white to color, because you're in that black and white for long enough, it is very jarring, and they use like bright, brilliant colors, which is awesome to really make that distinction. This is actually the second film that we've seen where they use black and white and color in different ways.
Pleasantville.
And yes. It's interesting that it's such a device in both of those films in different ways, but cool in the way that they do it.
Yeah, and the trailers for The Wizard of Oz only showed it in Technicolor. It didn't show the black and white stuff. So people, in theory, would have only known it to be a Technicolor movie before they walked into the theater. I don't know how big trailers were back then. It's not like you could just go on YouTube and watch them beforehand. But that shot of going from black and white to color was really going to be the hardest shot of the movie, and they were going to hand paint every frame in black and white, and they couldn't do it. It wasn't going to work. Did you see how they actually did it?
No.
So what they actually did was they had a stand-in for Judy Garland wearing a black and white version of the dress. So It's the stand-in's back and the shot of the house that's black and white or sepia or whatever. And then it goes into the soundstage that's all in color, and the stand-in kind of goes away, and the real Judy Garland walks in with her colorful dress, and that's how they do it, which is so much easier than whatever fucking thing they were going to do with hand painting every frame, which of course is a terrible idea. But
So the entire scene is filmed in color.
right, because they
Part of it's painted in black. Like the actual set is painted in like charcoal.
and really all that it is the door frame and the dress. But yes, and kind of to your point about the sound stages, once you arrive in Munchkinland in Oz, it is very, very clearly a soundstage to us. And I do think that probably people knew that back then, but it's just so vibrant and so colorful and so amazing that I'm guessing people didn't really care. There are some like harsh reviews of the movie from the time where people insult it and stuff like that, but this was a really big deal. And for some reason, I had it in my head that when it goes from black and white to color, it also goes from 4:3 to widescreen.
I remember that too. It
Okay.
didn't happen.
It does
didn't
not.
happen.
No, the entire movie is 4:3, which is, how they made movies back then, and it's fine. But I watched the movie with my daughter, and in the beginning, when it's black and white, I was like, oh, you see those black bars on the side there? Isn't that interesting? And I was kind of waiting for the scene to expand, and that didn't happen.
Do they have it in the 4:3 and Max? Because I thought it was widescreen the whole time, and I may just be misremembering.
No, I watched it on Max. It was in 4:3.
It was, so I just totally missed that.
Or you had it on some weird setting on your TV.
Possible. And I kind of wonder if the sets that look so fake to us right now, because we're seeing it in high def,
Yeah.
looked brilliant back then because of the lower tech projectors in the movie theater and the lower tech, for that matter, TV screens that people would watch it on at home later on.
I mean, I think the theater was probably still better definition than the television, right?
Yes, but the Scarecrow's mask is burlap. Like you can see the lines on his face now. You can see that when you watch the movie today. The audiences in 1939 did not see that. The quality of the cameras was not there. And Ray Bolger, the actor who played the Scarecrow, had those lines on his face for years because of that stupid fucking mask, and no one could see it.
That sucks.
It does. There are a lot of stories like that about the movie. You mentioned the asbestos that they dropped on their heads. Also, that scene where the witch goes up and down that elevator in Munchkinland. The actress caught fucking fire.
Margaret Hamilton?
Yes.
Shit.
The makeup that she was wearing was highly fucking flammable, and she was hospitalized. She had huge burns all over her body. Early on in filming, the actor who was playing the Tin Man was recast because the original actor had a severe reaction to the toxic paint that they put on his face. He was hospitalized. He lived. He was okay. I think I saw that he was like in an iron lung or something. Also, they destroyed that guy's reputation because basically the story was he had been fired from the movie. The studio wasn't going to say, oh, actually, we poisoned him with toxic paint. And when Jack Haley came in and took over the role, they used a different kind of paint that was non-toxic, and he was fine. And so the first guy, his reputation really suffered because everyone thought he was fired for being difficult on set or whatever.
And one more possible horrible story of death. The Wicked Witch throws a fireball. I also love that special effect. She throws a fireball at the Scarecrow after they meet the Tin Man. And you could see all the background trees, and there's something swinging from it. And the rumors are it's one of the Munchkins that killed themselves. There's something there.
It's a bird. I feel like we did this in a VH1 show or 7 VH1 shows. But yeah, it's a bird that was on set, and it is not a little person that killed themselves.
A bird is swinging back and forth.
It's not swinging. It just kind of is walking. And the way it's shot, it looks like something that it isn't. But little people did get hurt on the movie. The little people who played the flying monkeys, they were kind of hung by piano wires. The piano wires snapped and they got injured. Not only did the actress who played the Wicked Witch get burned, Her stunt double got burnt when they did the Surrender Dorothy stunt. Her broom exploded and she was really injured. So a lot of people got really fucking hurt on this movie in real life. No, there was not a dead munchkin swinging from a tree. That's the story that kind of came into pop culture. But a lot of people did really get actually hurt.
Are all of the munchkins little people?
Mostly.
Okay,
So
because there's some that clearly look like children.
yeah, so most of them are little people. There were a couple of kids that they filled out in the background. They're credited as the Singer Midgets. That is how they are credited in the movie. They were called that not because they sang, but because there was a guy named Leo Singer who had a troupe of little people that he brought around and did tours and things like that. It is shitty that this group of 100+ little people gets one credit as the Singer Midgets. Today, every single person would get a credit because of course they would. They're actors in the movie. A lot of them have a lot of screen time. Also, there are stories that they got paid less than Toto. Toto, the dog, and her dog trainer were very well compensated and paid more per week than the little people, which is fucking bullshit. Counterpoint is apparently a lot of these little people were European Jews who were able to flee Europe to come to America to make this movie, which in 1939 was a very, very good thing for them. And a lot of them are very grateful for this movie, even though they didn't get a credit and even though they were kind of stiffed on their paycheck.
I would imagine that any little person in Nazi Germany would have been among the. It's famous that the Jews were not the only people killed. They would have killed every one of them, Jew or not. That's fascinating that people were able to survive at 1939. Well, what a stroke of luck.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out very well for them. Yeah, and sure, the Nazis wouldn't have hesitated to kill a Jew or a little person, but a Jewish little person?
But I remember that the Munchkins didn't have a very big role at all in the book. Another actually big difference, the Wicked Witch in the book, not green, has one eye, and is barely even a presence in the book, for that matter.
Right.
But I'm wondering if they expanded the role of the Wicked Witch because Margaret Hamilton was both brilliant and memorable. I mean, how many of those lines do we know because she said them and said them so well?
She's definitely green-faced because it's a color film. That has to be the reason they picked that.
That makes sense.
And that makes me think that this trope of witches having green faces probably comes from Margaret Hamilton.
That's interesting, but then it really stuck with it because obviously the character of Elphaba, sorry to spoil this for you, James, becomes green.
Well,
and they
that
show how she
is
becomes
Wizard
green.
of Oz, but I'm just saying that any old witch, talking about the pointy hat witch,
Right.
could look green, and I wonder if it's just based on this, that we all have a collective recollection that, that's what witches look like. No, we all just saw Wizard of Oz when we were kids.
Yeah.
There was a conversation about how the Wicked Witch should look, and I believe the initial idea was that she was going to be beautiful, and somewhere along the line, they decided that no, Glinda the Good Witch is beautiful, and the Wicked Witch will be ugly. And I think they had to recast the role because the actress that they wanted at first was interested in playing the beautiful Wicked Witch, but not the ugly Wicked Witch. And Margaret Hamilton did a wonderful job, so it's fine. But that was a choice. That was a decision made by the movie makers. And there were a lot of people who worked on the script. Apparently it went through tons and tons of drafts and rewrites, and a lot of things changed. Apparently the one thing that didn't change from the very first draft was Kansas is black and white, Oz is in color.
Yeah. There's a lot that we're seeing in the movie which deviates from the book, but the movie really has become canon, whether it's how we think about the flying monkeys, whether it's, again, how we think about the line, whether it's how we think about the wizard. Glinda doesn't even show up until the end of the book, where she's actually the Witch of the South. The Witch of the North was actually an old woman. And yeah, you don't even see Glinda until the last chapter or so when she sends Dorothy back home. Sorry to spoil the ending here, but obviously they give Glinda a personality that again carries over into Wicked too.
Right.
Where she's very positive and a little bit ditzy. And the character is obviously very different to the extent that she exists in the book, and the old woman witch of the North doesn't have those traits either.
Well, I want to go back a little bit to the Wicked Witch. So we all saw this movie when we were kids, right? Mm-hmm. How scared were you of, I guess, the Wicked Witch primarily, but anything?
Of course. I mean, you see things very different when you're 5 versus when you're 45, obviously.
I love the fact that when the witch dies, her guards, who are about to kill everyone, are about to kill Dorothy and all those people, they're like, oh, thank God, we don't have to follow this crazy tyrant anymore. Everyone hates her. So,
well, the Winkies were so happy they actually put the Tin Man in charge of them.
Right.
You know, I read that Margaret Hamilton once appeared on Sesame Street.
No, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers? Oh, okay. Because it was basically to show that this is an actress and doesn't mean they're really bad. They're just making make-believe. And But it's one of those roles that there's a Wicked Witch, there's Nurse Ratched, there's King Joffrey. These people are just seen as, they're just such good actors, and the role is played and written so well for them and directed well that you almost can't separate those people, and it's hard for them to find roles after that.
I was going to say, I think about Jamie Walters from 90210, who played Donna's boyfriend Ray, who abused her. After his character pushed her down the stairs, even after they tried to rehabilitate him 2 years later, he couldn't get work again after that, and then wound up becoming, I think, a volunteer fireman or something.
I think every single one of our listeners right now was going, are they about to talk about Donna's boyfriend from 90210? I love that reference that you pulled from.
Yeah, I mean, I was with you on the Wicked references, but you lost me on the 90210.
I love it. I love it.
Oh, man, that kills me.
Sorry. But, James, were you scared of this movie when you were a kid?
Absolutely. The Wicked Witch, the flying monkeys.
Okay. I remember watching this movie when my cousin Jeff was babysitting my sister and I, and that scene when the Wicked Witch captures Dorothy and she's there in her castle and all the flying monkeys were around, my sister and I just had to go into the other room and, hey, Jeff, let us know when that's over and we'll come back. Because we could not be in the room when that scene was going.
I had that with a movie, and it's really, really embarrassing to talk about it, but we've all known each other long enough.
Okay.
Follow That Bird.
That you were scared of?
When Big Bird got kidnapped and painted blue, that terrified me. I had nightmares over that.
Oh, see, that didn't give me nightmares. That just made me profoundly, deeply sad when he's in the cage and he's blue and he's singing.
Yeah.
To me, that wasn't scary. That was heartbreaking.
Oh my God, I was traumatized over that, James.
I've never seen Follow That Bird.
My sister has requested to come on the podcast to talk about that.
I will ignore that episode. I'm not listening to that. And I listen to every episode.
Aw, you're a good fan and a good friend.
I'm a super fan.
Aw. But moving away from the scary Wicked Witch to Glinda the Good Witch, she is not fucking helpful at all. Like, I don't think I'd ever really realized that before I watched this movie the other night. Like, she tells Dorothy to follow the yellow brick road, ask the wizard for help. She gives her the slippers, and she's like, bye. There's not really direction. There's not really explanation. She doesn't really protect Dorothy when the Wicked Witch gets all up in her face. And Glinda's like, you don't have power here. I guess you can leave. She's not like, back off. She really just lets it all happen. I guess she saves them in the poppy field by blowing asbestos into their mouths, which is, not the best way to help them. Yeah, and then at the very end, when she's like, oh yeah, you had the power to go home all along, it's like, well, thanks for nothing?
Again, looking at the book versus the movie, and obviously, even though it was a big budget for back then, it was still a somewhat limited budget and limited technology. It wasn't Glinda who got them out of the fields, it was a bunch of big mice.
Oh.
Yeah, and they had to all band together to get the lion out of there because he was so freaking heavy.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, the witch, you see her in the beginning. I don't remember if she comes back at some point later on. She gives Dorothy a kiss, which is also supposed to bless and protect her, in addition to the shoes. And those were supposed to protect her from the witch. So there was that. It wasn't like she did nothing, but she kind of served her purpose and then basically got out of the way.
I see what you're saying, Al, but I respectfully disagree. I think you alluded to the answer with Glinda. They ask her at the end, basically, what the fuck? Why didn't you just help us off in the beginning? She can't because you had to figure it out for yourself.
Yes, and the journey is the lesson. She needs to discover this on her own, which I understand, But it does feel a little bit like, yeah, cool, thanks, we almost died. We were almost killed by flying monkeys. So maybe you could have mentioned that there was a lesson I had to learn or something like that. But that lesson of there's no place like home, it doesn't feel like that's true for Dorothy because she lives with her aunt and uncle. Presumably her parents are dead. I don't know. Did they say that in the book?
I believe so.
Okay. I mean, if she's living with her aunt and uncle, that would be the assumption. It's the Depression. Wasn't that like the Dust Bowl in the middle of America? The mean neighbor came over and said, hey, give me your dog. I need to destroy it. And her aunt and uncle are like, yeah, okay, I guess. I mean, she's got a little piece of paper, so we'll let you kill the dog.
No, she also owns half the jobs in town.
Yeah, but still, the aunt and uncle are powerless to stop her. And she's going to come back for Toto, presumably, if she's that hell-bent on killing the dog. There's twisters that blow through the farm every now and again. And so home kind of sucks compared to the magical land of Oz, where she meets these wonderful friends and everything's in color. And yeah, there's scary witches, but she kills both of the wicked witches easily.
By accident.
By accident, sure. But so maybe there's no place like Oz and maybe she's better off staying there? Like, I don't really see why home is so special to her.
I don't think it's a great lesson. I mean, especially in this country, I think the problems happen when you live in your little neighborhood. You know what your neighbors look like, what they think, and what you guys want. And you just assume everyone wants what we want on this street. Home is wonderful, and you shouldn't forget home, and you should go back home and recharge and these things. But at the end, she was like, I will never leave this place. I will die here. We can pick my grave so that I will eventually die in this field.
But I think first thing, that is a lot of America. Second of all, you want to be in somebody else's body, somebody else's life, great. But at the end of the day, you're going to realize these people have problems too. And maybe I'd rather just take the problems that I have and the ones that I at least know.
But never leave home? I'm never going to leave here ever again, Auntie Em.
She went out, she had her adventure, and she was good.
What do you call that thing in the Amish culture? It's like a
Rumspring
Rumpelspear
or something?
Rumspringer or something, when they go out into the world and they can either choose to be, among non-Amish society, or they come back and then it's never again. I do think maybe they meant more family. There's no place like family, and not necessarily blood family, because all those people on the farm weren't her blood relatives. I think that's what they were going for, but I felt like Judy Garland's character she was really striving for the physical place that was Kansas and that farm.
Judy Garland, playing the part of Dorothy. Great actress, great singer. I'm not going to take anything away from her. But Dorothy's like a 10 or 11-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And knowing that, having read the book, Judy Garland is not believable in that role for that reason.
She was older than Dorothy was supposed to be based on the book. In the movie, they never say how old she is, but she does throw some temper tantrums in the beginning of the movie about the dog, and she is acting like a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, and she doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't quite fit. Also, Judy Garland was put in a terrible place by the studio. So Judy Garland was considered fat at the time. She was made to wear corsets. She was not allowed to eat on set. She was just given cigarettes and alcohol. And she's like 16, I think, 15, 16 at the time. She ended up dying of a barbiturate overdose. Apparently, a lot of her substance problems started on this set. Also, the critics, there were plenty of critics when the movie came out who said, oh, Judy Garland is fine, but she's clearly well-fed or something like that. Ooh. Like really, really shitty, awful things about this very talented actress who's got amazing pipes and can really sing and became iconic for this movie. I mean, I know she was an actress who was in lots of other movies. I couldn't name any off the top of my head, but this performance is so amazing, and the shit that she went through for it. It's awful.
The way that we look at the world today is different from how we looked at the world even from when we were in college and before. And I remember when we were in college, I think it was senior year, it being big news that they were changing the way that the Barbie doll looked because they realized that the representation that these young girls grew up with for years and years, first thing was giving them body image issues, and second of all was just simply not realistic for any woman.
Right, I think the original Barbie would have been like 7 feet tall, and doesn't she have like a size 00 waist or something?
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, things like that, and even with fashion shows and in magazines, they use a more diverse set of models now.
Speaking of diversity, wouldn't you think they would have people that would have different color skin? I just think it would have been just obvious to have people that just look ethnically different so that you could have these exotic looking, fantastic looking Oz characters. Because there's a scene where there's a hot pink horse, and they call him a horse of a different color, which is a part of a phrase. And you can obviously tell what they're doing. It's just a cut to a different horse that they have as a different color. But, they're able to show a yellow, a blue, a pink horse. You would think that they would want to have diverse-looking people in this film.
Yeah, it's weird that the diversity comes in the horses and not the people.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
By the way, they color the horses with gelatin. That was the dye that they used, which is
a little ironic. Because isn't it like horse bones?
Exactly. And the horses were licking themselves in between the takes. So, yes, exactly. And it's not as bad as third-degree burns and the poisoning from the skin, but also just kind of icky.
Yeah. I want to talk about the songs for a moment. The most famous part of this film. You got your Somewhere Over the Rainbows that of course I remembered, and the Follow the Yellow Brick Road. If I Only Had a Brain. And I also didn't realize it's the exact same song 3 times. If I Only Had a Heart. I think the Lion says something similar.
If I Only Had the Nerve.
But even there were these small songs that they absolutely awakened something in me. Like at the very end at the witch's castle, yo, yo, yo. I had not heard that tune in decades. And it's
I didn't
scary.
realize that came from this movie.
I think that's your point, right? You forgot like how influential this movie is. I watched the movie with my daughter, and when Dorothy started singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, she's like, oh, that's from this movie? And yes, she's 11, so different perspective. But yeah, there is so much in this movie that has been referenced and repeated and paid homage to. And there was this study that was done to determine the most influential films ever. And that was sort of the metric that they used, was how many times it is referenced and referred to in other movies and TV shows and other works of art. Not surprisingly, The Wizard of Oz is number 1 on that list, which makes sense when you think about how all of these things are just ingrained into our heads. You hear the word Dorothy, you think of this movie. There's a million other Dorothys, but you think of this one. You think of tornadoes, you think of The Wizard of Oz. You see Yellow Brick Road, I mean, Behind the Curtain. We're not in Kansas anymore. There's so many things in this movie that are referred to. Do you want to take a guess as to what the second most influential movie is?
Yes, I would have to guess it's Star Wars.
You're correct. Also, though, adding to the irony of that, when people talk about the hero's journey, they talk about Joseph Campbell and they talk about Star Wars. Star Wars is also The Wizard of Oz. It's a classic hero's journey. Also, setting aside that she's got a big furry companion and a man made out of metal, but there's a wizard and she has to go on this quest and fight this evil villain. It's not exactly the same, but there's a lot of parallels between Star Wars and The Wizard of Oz.
Maybe Mrs. Gulch is Dorothy's mother.
Maybe you're onto something there. That just kind of proves the point of just how influential The Wizard of Oz is. It's so influential, it influenced the second most influential thing. So, really fucking influential.
Wow. You guys have done this podcast for 8 years, roughly?
Yeah, 8.5 now. Yeah.
400, how many episodes?
This is 438.
For as influential as this movie has been, how have you guys gone over 8 years without looking at this one?
It's a really good question. And while doing the research for this podcast episode, There are other movies from around this time, Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane. There are a lot of classic movies from the history of cinema that we haven't gotten to. I think it's because we tend to favor movies from the 80s and 90s in our childhood, but we should go farther back and revisit some of these cinema classics from the 30s, 40s. I'm into it. I want to talk about the end of the movie where Dorothy kills the Wicked Witch. That is a really anticlimactic death because we don't know that the Wicked Witch is vulnerable to water. Dorothy doesn't know that. It almost seems like maybe the Wicked Witch doesn't know that because she has a bucket of water just lying around in her castle, which if that's fatal to her, you would think that wouldn't be there. It's an accident. Dorothy kills the Wicked Witch of the East by accident. I mean, you could even say she didn't really kill her. The house did, the storm did, whatever. I'd let some lawyer argue that in court. But she throws the bucket of water to help her friend, and it accidentally kills the witch. I mean, it's not dramatically interesting.
But it only works, in my opinion, if you do think that this entire thing is a dream. Because then, yeah, the bucket of water is where it has to be.
The witch enslaved Dorothy and made her clean things.
In the book?
Oh.
Yeah. But that doesn't happen in the movie.
Right. But then the other thing was the witch wasn't wearing like this pointy hat. She was wearing like some kind of like brown jeweled hat, if I remember right. But that hat was what allowed her to command the flying monkeys. And whoever wore that would get like 3 wishes from the monkeys. And Dorothy and her friends were able to use that to eventually make their way to their respective destinations at the end of the story.
Oh. So it's not the wizard who helps them.
The wizard is largely what we see in the movie. A little bit more drawn out. Each of them meets the wizard. The wizard's in like 4 different forms. The wizard does send them to ultimately kill the witch, which they do. And the wizard does admit he's just an ordinary guy and he builds this Emerald City. And for that matter, it's not even emerald nor green. He makes everyone wear green glasses. He says so that you're not blinded by the city's brilliance in reality, so that they see everything as an Emerald City.
I love that.
The wizard's a fucking con artist, which we see in the very beginning, and we're seeing here.
And we also see at the very end of the film, too. I had never noticed that. Well, obviously, he's a con man with the wizard part. But there's another con he does later. He talks about how, since he has no choice, he's going to have to take Dorothy back on a hot air balloon. Because he is one of the world's experts at hot air balloons. Remember when he was saying this?
Yeah.
And he did a fantastic experiment. And then 3 seconds into his hot air balloon ride, Dorothy's like, come back. And you know what he says? He goes, I can't. I don't know how this thing works. And
Right.
I go, oh my God, I never caught it. He's a con man.
That was why he kept himself secluded, and that was why he left, because he was afraid that everyone was going to find out.
That's interesting, that additional context. I think in the movie, his reveal is also kind of anticlimactic because he sends them for the broomstick from the Wicked Witch. Why? Why does he want the broomstick? We don't know. Is it because he wants the Wicked Witch dead? Maybe. Why? I don't know.
I think it's an impossible task. I think it's a task for them to fail.
Yes.
So the evidence of that is that when they do return with the broomstick, he's like, come back tomorrow. And then Toto discovers him and pay no attention to the man behind that curtain. Mm-hmm. But even that doesn't make any sense because then he grabs this bag that has the diploma and it has the medal and it has the heart watch thing. So he was ready to give them the things. Why does he need them to come back tomorrow? Why does he need them to get the broomstick in the first place? He can give them the things because they already had the things and he has these little trinkets. So it doesn't make a lot of logical sense.
It deviated from the book a little bit in that way where it might be more believable that he would have some of those things on hand. Like he pours some kind of like concrete into the scarecrow. He says, this is brains and I'm putting the brains inside of you or something like that. And with the lion, he has him drink some kind of liquid he called liquid courage. So now the lion has courage inside of him.
So we gave him booze?
Well, he gave him a placebo, I assume, because he's a con man. I like that better because the lion just needed a little bit of confidence. Then he tells him, this is magic confidence juice. And if he drinks it, then he goes, yeah, I could take on the world. So I like that ending. That's a little better.
I did notice watching the movie this time that the scarecrow who doesn't have a brain, he's coming up with plans. He's thinking things through. The Tin Man, who doesn't have a heart, is very sad and very worried about Dorothy when she's kidnapped. And the Lion, who says he doesn't have any courage, yeah, he kind of runs away a couple times, but he's still going after the Wicked Witch. So it is clear that all three of them have the thing that they don't think that they have. In regards to the Lion, it looks like he pins that medal on his fur, which seems like it would hurt. You know, it's not like a medal with, you know, a ribbon that would go around your neck. It looks like it's a pin kind of a thing. Courage or no, that would hurt. And I do remember a high school math teacher showing us this part of the movie and how it gets it wrong when the Scarecrow says a thing about the isosceles triangle. He's saying the square root of the sides of an isosceles triangle, and it should be the square of the sides of a right triangle. So it's wrong in multiple ways. So, Mike, let me ask you, I'm not going to be surprised by your answer, I don't think, but do you think The Wizard of Oz stands a test of time?
At the end of the day, the answer is yes, and we'll cut to the chase here. But I want to talk about a couple things. I kind of look at this movie as a museum piece. This movie could not be made as it was back then in 2024. First thing, I don't know that this is something that kids today or adults today would be interested in the same way. We would need more of a story, a little bit more complexity with respect to the characters, better sets, different music that's more modern. You look at Wicked, which is going to come out, that has the feel of a modern musical. And that has more complex characters. I mean, Elphaba is more than the little witch who goes, "I'll get you, my pretty." Glinda, again, has more complexities. I think Wicked kind of works in that way, in ways that Wizard of Oz isn't yet prepared to do. So what I kind of like to think about with this movie is, this movie walked so a lot of other movies could run. Mm-hmm. Be it Star Wars, be it Harry Potter, be it Indiana Jones. As a museum piece, it does stand the test of time. It doesn't as a movie that we would make today, but I think that we're able to really appreciate it for exactly what it is. Yes, it does stand the test of time.
Okay. James, what about you? What do you think?
I think this film is wonderful. I don't think you need to change much today. I don't think that a CGI flying monkey would work any better in this film. There's a couple things that were a little bit laughable in the film that I saw this time. I had no idea that when they go after the witch at the end, they're all armed. The Tin Man not only has the axe, he has a big wrench. Did you notice what the Scarecrow has?
A tiny gun?
He has a gun.
I did notice that,
He has a pistol.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly today either, especially in a musical.
But also, it just seemed so out of place. Like
Yes.
a gun. Like it was so weird. The dialogue in this film is so much more clever than I remembered it being. The wizard at the end to the Tin Man, he goes, "And now, my galvanized friend." What a great line for a Tin Man. I didn't get that when I was 5 years old, but that's clever. I like that one. The lion falls down in the poppy field, and I go, are his feet going to be up in the air? And they are, and I just smiled. It's kind of funny. Like most musicals, there's a couple songs I don't like. I don't really like that song, "If I Were King of the Forest." I don't really like that one.
That's a bad one.
I fast-forwarded through that one.
Yeah, that's a bad one. But overall, it's such a lovely little magical film. Well, I will say I think this film stands the test of time. I want to know, Al, from you, does Wizard of Oz stand the test of time?
Yes, the movie definitely stands the test of time. I watched it with my daughter. She's 11. She'd seen it before. She kind of forgot some details, like Somewhere Over the Rainbow. She's very, very excited to see Wicked. She's going to see the musical, and we're going to go see the movie. She liked it. She liked this movie, and even though it does look like a movie from the 30s, and even though it does sound like a movie from the 30s, basically I'm just repeating everything you said, Mike. I 1,000% agree with you. You would expect a movie today to be a little bit more rich and to have more character development and to have more details about who these characters are and why they're doing the things that they're doing, and to have a little bit more meat on the bone. This movie doesn't have a lot of meat on the bone. However, it is still unbelievably influential in all the ways that we talked about. Any movie would kill to have a single line of dialogue that lasts throughout the years. And this movie's got a million of them. And the songs are iconic, and the performances, everything about it has just permeated pop culture in a really, really deeply profound way. I think that list of the most influential movies is probably right. I can't think of another movie that is more influential than this, even though I love Star Wars more, probably personally. The fact that Star Wars was inspired by this movie, I think really says a lot about how meaningful this movie is. Of course, it stands the test of time. You know, I was thinking about it because this movie came out 85 years ago, and then, you know, there was the 1925 version and the 1910 silent short movie, and Wicked is coming out now. I was thinking to myself, is this the oldest movie franchise? And I was kind of Googling around, and I think it's debatable because Wicked isn't really a prequel, sequel to this movie. It kind of, sort of is, but not officially. And there were some Nosferatu silent movies from the early days of cinema. So it's debatable. It's not a clear-cut winner, but I think you could make the argument that this is the longest running piece of IP that, you know, has existed for over a century, and they're still making new stuff related to this piece of IP. This has been around for a really, really long time. So yes, of course, The Wizard of Oz stands the test of time. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming back on the show. You clearly love The Wizard of Oz. By the way, I'm also just really impressed that you read the book and watched the movie.
I do the work.
Yeah, you really go above and beyond. Thank you for coming on the show today. Come back anytime. You know you've got an open invitation. It's always great hanging out. That's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we're going to return to Oz. We are going to talk about The Wiz. I really genuinely have no interest in talking about Return to Oz. I've heard just such terrible things. But The Wiz, I think, is worth talking about. I'm pretty sure I've only seen it once. Have you ever seen it, James?
I've never seen it.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. Those are the only two people who I remember off the top of my head. In the meantime, we want to hear your thoughts on The Wizard of Oz and Poisonous Paint and all of these things. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. You can also email us at testoftimepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.